Today, there was pressure on the Prime Minister to speak out. So why is the government refusing to condemn what's happening on the border? Joining me now from the foyer of the House of Commons is Mark Holland, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety, and NDP immigration critic Jenny Kwan. We did ask for a Conservative MP to join us, but not a single one was made available. Thanks to both of you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And I just want to preface this by saying I apologize in advance if we do have to interrupt you to head over to that White House briefing. But in the meantime, we'll get started here. Mr. Holland, I want to start with you. Do you still consider the U.S. a safe third country given what's happening there right now?
It's currently under review. Obviously, with the Safe Third Party Agreement, we evaluate decisions that are being made in the United States on a real-time basis to determine the status of that agreement. And certainly in a Canadian context, that is being evaluated regularly, and in light of this, the recent events, that's being looked at immediately right now.
So that isn't the impression I had after question period today. The Prime Minister insisted that it was still considered a safe third country, especially by the UN, and then accused, I believe it was the NDP, of playing politics by even asking the question. So is there a formal review underway about whether or not they can be trusted as a safe third country?
We are always reviewing the agreement in the context of
prompted by what we're seeing right now?
No, I think that any time a decision is made by the United States with respect to its immigration policy, there is a review that is undertaken to see the implications of that on the Safe Third Party Agreement, to take a look at what the UN HCR is saying about it. It's something that we review as events unfold, and so that's always the case, and certainly is the case here.
What about for yourself, though, personally? Like, does this give you cause for concern? Does this make you want to review exactly how that country is considered in our asylum system?
Well, let's be very clear. In a Canadian context, we issued a ministerial directive. Minister Goodale did a year ago that made it very clear that when it comes to children, their best interests must be placed forward. And using detention for minors is something that happens on an extraordinarily rare basis in a Canadian context. The only instances where you would see that is where it was in the child's best interest, and similar to a family case for a Canadian citizen, where if a child was in danger and needed to be protected, that would be the only instances where you would see somebody being detained. So we've been very clear in the Canadian context how that works. We're reviewing the decisions that are being made in the United States to see its impact on the Safe Third Party Agreement as we, as I say, evaluate these changes any time they occur.
Ms. Kwan, is that the impression you had when you were asking the questions in question period today?
Absolutely not. The Prime Minister pretty well just said that the United States is still a safe third country. And then, of course, he's accused me of somehow entering into politics. Look, under no circumstances can anybody interpret the current situation, the current policy of Trump of ripping away children from their mothers, from their parents, and then putting them in detention centers that they don't know when, the parents will not know when they will reunite with their child, when they will see their child again. Under no circumstances could anybody say that this is in the best interest of the child. That policy, frankly, is in violation of all international laws. The UN Human Rights Commissioner just issued a statement to say that that this is absolutely unconscionable and to condemn this behavior. In fact, the UNHCR themselves has just issued a press release to say that this is inhumane.
So what do you want the government to do, though? Do you want them to just get out of the agreement, scrap the agreement altogether? And would you not have some concern about the impact that might have on a relationship with the Trump administration, which is already at a pretty tenuous point?
Well, I've been calling for the government, for the Prime Minister, to suspend the Safe Third Country Agreement right from the beginning, right from day one when Trump brought in the travel ban. And ever since then, you have seen at different times, at different junctures, the Trump administration targeting a group of migrants and then striking fear in the hearts and minds of these individuals. And now to the point where literally they're separating over 2,000 children away from their parents. All for what? Just because these asylum seekers are trying to get to safety. And that is absolutely outrageous. Now, so what do I expect the government to do? I expect Canada to step up. I expect Canada, who is a middle power, who is known and respected in the international community for our compassion, for our humanitarianism, for our strive towards peace, to step up and to take this on and to work with the international community and to say that this is not acceptable.
Mr. Holland, does Ms. Kwan have a point? Should the Prime Minister and your government be saying more to oppose policies like this?
Well, I think we, first of all, made it very clear about what we do in Canada and what our policies are, and people should be very clear that we put the interests of children first. The detention only happens when families are involved, when it's absolutely necessary, and we keep those families together unless it's not in the child's best interest to do so. That's the Canadian policy. When dealing with the Americans, this is an emergent situation. We're obviously going to be working with our international counterparts to see what impact this is going to have on Canadian policy.
Okay, I apologize. I have to interrupt because we're going to head live to Washington right now, where White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders is speaking to reporters, soon to be along with the Secretary of Homeland Security. Let's take a listen.
As always, I'll be back up afterwards to take questions on other news of the day.
Thanks.
Well, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be here because I would love to see if I can help explain some of what's going on and give you some of the facts. I know there have been a lot put out there, but hopefully we can clarify some things today. I just wanted to start by thanking the sheriffs of the United States. I had the privilege of speaking to them this morning at the National Sheriff's Association conference. We are so thankful for their partnership at DHS and all they do to protect our communities, so I thank them. So I want to provide you an update on the illegal immigration crisis on our southern border and the efforts the administration is taking to solve this crisis and to stop the flood of illegal immigrants, drugs, contraband, and crime coming across the border. So let's just start with a few numbers and facts. So in the last 3 months, we have seen illegal immigration on our southern border exceed 50,000 people each month, multiples over each month last year. Since this time last year, there has been a 325% increase in unaccompanied alien children and a 435% increase in family units entering the country illegally. Over the last 10 years, there has been a 1,700% increase in asylum claims, resulting in asylum backlog today in our country of 600,000 cases. Since 2013, the United States has admitted more than 500,000 illegal immigrant minors and family units from Central America, most of whom today are at large in the United States. At the same time, large criminal organizations such as MS-13 have violated our borders and gained a deadly foothold within the United States. This entire crisis, just to be clear, is not new. It's been occurring and expanded over many decades. But currently, it is the exclusive product of loopholes in our federal immigration laws that prevent illegal immigrant minors and family members from being detained and removed to their home countries. In other words, these loopholes create a functionally open border. Apprehension without detention and removal is not border security. We have repeatedly called on Congress to close these loopholes. I myself have met with as many members have been willing to meet with me. I've testified 7 times. I will continue to make myself available to ask that they work with us to solve this crisis. Yet the voices most loudly criticizing the enforcement of our current laws are those whose policies created this crisis and whose policies perpetrate it. In particular, we need to reform 3 major loopholes. Let me quickly walk you through them. First, we need to amend the 2008 Trafficking Victims Prevention Reauthorization Act, or TVPR, which is much easier to say. This law encourages families to put children in the hands of smugglers to bring them alone on this dangerous trek northward. And make no mistake, we've talked about this before, this trek is dangerous and deadly. Second, we need to reform our asylum laws to end the systemic abuse of our asylum system and stop fraud. Right now, our asylum system fails to assist asylum seekers who legitimately need it. We are a country of compassion. We are a country of heart. We must fix the system so that those who truly need asylum can, in fact, receive it. Third, we need to amend the Flores Settlement Agreement and recent expansions, which would allow for family detention during the removal process. And we need Congress to fully fund our ability to hold families together through the immigration process. Until these loopholes are closed by Congress, it is not possible as a matter of law to detain and remove whole family units who arrive illegally in the United States. Congress and the courts created this problem, and Congress alone can fix it. Until then, we will enforce every law we have on the books to defend the sovereignty and security of the United States. Those who criticize the enforcement of our laws have offered only one countermeasure: open borders, the quick release of all illegal alien families, and the decision not to enforce our laws. This policy would be disastrous. Its prime beneficiaries would be the smuggling organizations themselves, and the prime victims would be the children who would be plunged into the smuggling machines and gang recruitment on the trip north. There's a lot of misinformation about what DHS is and is not doing as it relates to families at the border, and I want to correct the record. Here are the facts. First, this administration did not create a policy of separating families at the border. We have a statutory responsibility that we take seriously to protect alien children from human smuggling, trafficking, and other criminal actions while enforcing our immigration laws. We have a long existing policy multiple administrations have followed that outline when we may take action to protect children. We will separate those who claim to be a parent and child if we cannot determine a familiar or custodial relationship exists. For example, if there's no documentation to confirm the claimed relationship between an adult and a child. We do so if the parent is a national security, public, or safety risk, including when there are criminal charges at issue, and it may not be appropriate to maintain the family in detention together. We also separate a parent and child if the adult is suspected of human trafficking. There have been cases where minors have been used and trafficked by unrelated adults in an effort to avoid detention. And I'd stop here to say in the last 5 months, we have a 314% increase in adults and children arriving at the border fraudulently claiming to be a family unit. This is obviously of concern. And separation can occur when the parent is charged with human smuggling. Under those circumstances, we would detain the parent in an appropriate secure detention facility separate from the child. What has changed is that we no longer exempt entire classes of people who break the law. Everyone is subject to prosecution. When DHS refers a case against a parent or legal guardian for criminal prosecution, the parent or legal guardian will be placed into the U.S. Marshals Service custody for pretrial determination pursuant to an order by a federal judge, and any accompanied child will be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services and will be reclassified as an unaccompanied alien child. That is in accordance with the TVPRA, a law that was passed by Congress, and a following court order, neither which are actions the Trump administration has taken. And let's be clear, if an American were to commit a crime anywhere in the United States, they would go to jail and they would be separated from their family. This is not a controversial idea. Second, children in DHS and HHS custody are being well taken care of. The Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement provides meals, medical care, and educational services to these children. They are provided temporary shelter, and HHS works hard to find a parent, relative, or foster home to care for these children. Parents can still communicate with their children through phone calls and video conferencing. And a parent who is released from custody can be a sponsor and ask HHS to release the child back into their care. Further, these minors can still apply for asylum and other protections under U.S. immigration law if eligible. We take allegations of mistreatment seriously, and I want to stress this point. We investigate. We hold those accountable when and if it should occur. We have some of the highest detention standards in the country. Claiming these children and their parents are treated inhumanely is not true and completely disrespects the hardworking men and women at the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Third, parents who entered illegally are, by definition, criminals. Illegal entry is a crime as determined by Congress. By entering our country illegally, often in dangerous circumstances, illegal immigrants have put their children at risk. Fourth, CBP and ICE officers are properly trained to care for minors in their custody. DHS and HHS treats all individuals in its custody with dignity and respect and complies with all laws and policy. This reinforces and reiterates the need to consider the best interest of the children and mandates adherence to established protocols to protect at-risk populations, to include standards for the transport and treatment of minors in DHS and HHS custody. Additionally, all U.S. Border Patrol personnel on the southwest border are bilingual, every last one of them. They are directed to clearly explain the relevant process to apprehended individuals and provide detainees with written documentation in both Spanish and English that lays out the process and appropriate phone numbers to contact. And finally, DHS is not separating families legitimately seeking asylum at ports of entry. If an adult enters at a port of entry and claims asylum, they will not face prosecution for illegal entry. They have not committed a crime by coming to the port of entry. As I mentioned, DHS does have a responsibility to protect minors, and in that case as well, we will only separate the family if we cannot determine there is a familiar relationship, if the child may be at risk with the parent or legal guardian, or if the parent or legal guardian is referred for prosecution. We have a duty to protect the American people, and it's one that I take very seriously. Here is the bottom line. DHS is no longer ignoring the law. We are enforcing the laws as they exist on the books. As long as illegal entry remains a criminal offense, DHS will not look the other way. DHS will faithfully execute the laws enacted by Congress, as we are sworn to do. As I said earlier today, surely it is the beginning of the unraveling of democracy when the body who makes the laws, instead of changing them, tells the enforcement body not to enforce the law. I asked Congress to ask this week so that we can secure our borders and uphold our humanitarian ideas. These two missions should not be pitted against each other. If we close the loopholes, we can accomplish both. Before I take questions, I just want to ask that in your reporting, please consider the men and women of DHS who are dedicated law enforcement officers and who often put their lives at risk. Let's remember their sacrifice and commitment to this country. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yes.
Secretary Nielsen, if you could, what you talked about there, DHS is no longer ignoring the law. You're calling on Congress to change the law. I mean, that is the big message here. Members of Congress on the Democratic side say that you are using children as a lever to try to get them to take legislative action. What do you say to that?
I say that is a very cowardly response. It's clearly within their power to make the laws and change the laws. They should do so. Yes.
Thank you. Have you seen the photos of children in cages? Have you heard the audio clip of these children wailing that just came out today?
I have not seen something that came out today, but I have been to detention centers. And again, I would reference you to our standards. I would reference you to the care provided, not just by the Department of Homeland Security, but by the Department of Health and Human Services when they get to HHS.
Is that the image of this country that you want out there, children?
The image that I want of this country is an immigration system that secures our borders and upholds our humanitarian ideals. Congress needs to fix it.
How is that
Yes.
Secretary, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to Laura Bush. She had an op-ed. She says this is cruel. She supports an application of the law. Even the current First Lady, Melania Trump, has said we should be a nation of laws. We should do so with heart. Do you have anything you want to tell them? Do you believe they're misunderstanding the situation? Or do you believe there's any component of this policy, which, as you've outlined, other administrations have done, but you're using in a way that is more intense and creates this separation issue?
My response would be is calling attention to this matter is important. This is a very serious issue that has resulted after years and years of Congress not taking action. So I would thank them both for their comments. I would thank them both for their concerns. I share their concerns, but Congress is the one that needs to fix this.
Policy is not, by your definition, in any way cruel.
We're listening to the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security. She's updating reporters on that country's immigration policy. Let's bring back the CBC's Lindsay Duncombe. I know you've been listening in as well, Lindsay. Just like you predicted, no backing down there.
Certainly not at all. She said the same sort of points that she said before, the same kind of thing that the president has been saying. They're insisting that they are enforcing the law, when in truth, what they have been doing is putting in place a policy shift, a way of interpreting the law that is making that these families, when the parent gets arrested at the border, are being separated. Their main justification for this is it's the belief of this administration that many of the parents here showing up with their children are not actually actually the parents of those children, that children are being used by criminals in order to sneak into the country. And that really fills the same kind of narrative that we've been hearing from Donald Trump from the moment he started running for president. Being tough on people coming over the southern border has long been what he's aimed to do. And it's interesting to watch this news conference in the context of a report that just came out in Politico that said that there are new crackdowns planned for ICE and on immigration in the United States over the summer. And the purpose of that, according to the article, is to have it appear as though, or have the action be such that the president looks like he's fulfilling his tough on immigration promises as we go into the midterms, because this is one of those policies that Donald Trump has very much been consistent on. And now what we're seeing is that translated into action. And we have to remember that there are a lot of people in this country that believe that, as tough as these actions are to see, that they think that that's the kind of tough attitude on the border that needs to happen in this country.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe in Washington.